A very good morning, students. We'll start our lecture 8 of Fundamentals of Agronomy with a topic called as Modern Concepts of Tillage. Why it is called as modern concepts? Because it is different from that of a conventional tillage practices we used to follow, where primary tillage, secondary tillage in order to disturb the soil structure. Why this technique was followed? It was followed mainly because in order to overcome the disadvantage with respect to the conventional tillage. If you see here, the conventional tillage, the often wasted the energy, and sometimes the soil structure was destroyed. So this was the problem with respect to the conventional tillage. To overcome that, new modern concepts such as minimum tillage, zero tillage, stubble mulch tillage has come into the picture. And another reason for the application of this minimum tillage was mainly because of the steep rise in the oil price during 1960s. Because of that, in order to reduce the cost on the fuel, they have brought with the minimum tillage. Repeated use of heavy machinery destroys the soil structure, causing soil pans and leads to erosion. So the need of planting zone and water management zone are different. So based on that need, we have developed the concept called as modern concepts of tillage. So if you see that among modern concepts, one among the concept is conservation tillage. This is not the practice, it is a principle. What is that principle? At least 30% of the crop residue should be maintained on the soil surface, and such method we call it as conservation tillage. It is a part of conservation agriculture. USA is the first nation to start the conservation agriculture. We stand fourth, but the USA is the country which stands first with respect to the minimum tillage. There are three major principles with respect to the conservation tillage. That is maintaining the crop residue, at least 30% crop residue on the soil surface, minimum soil disturbance, and permanent soil cover with a crop diversity is the three principles on which conservation agriculture is dependent on. So if you see that in all over the world, US stands first with respect to the conservation agriculture. The second is minimum tillage, which came into the year 1974 due to high cost of tillage, mainly because of steep rise in the oil prices. Minimum tillage is aimed at reducing the tillage at a minimum necessary for ensuring a good seed bed, rapid germination, and satisfactory and favorable growing condition. If you see here, tillage can be reduced in two ways. What are the two ways? The first way is either by omitting the operations which do not give you the much benefit as compared to that of cost, and combining the agriculture operation like seeding and fertilizer application. In this way, you can reduce the tillage operation. We see further what are the advantages of the minimum tillage. The first advantage, it improves the soil condition. Higher infiltration is caused by the proper vegetation growth on the soil, less resistant to the root growth due to improved structure, less soil compaction by reduced movement of heavy tillage vehicles, and less soil erosion as compared to that of conventional tillage are the advantages of the minimum tillage. And the disadvantage is because the seed germination is very poor because of the presence of residue on the soil surface. In minimum tillage, more nitrogen has to be added because the rate of decomposition of organic matter is very slow because of presence of huge dry matter on the soil surface. The nodulation is affected in some legume crops like peas and broad beans. Sowing operation are difficult with the ordinary equipment. So for conservation agriculture, we have a specialized equipment called as happy seeder or straw management tools, super straw management tools. In this way, we use certain techniques or tools for sowing under the minimum tillage. Continuous use of herbicide causes pollution problem and dominance of perennial problem. In minimum tillage, the weed density is very high. So we use certain herbicide. So that will result in the pollution problem. Further, the different method of minimum tillage. Here, three methods of minimum tillage we have. That is, the first is row zone tillage. Row zone tillage. In between the rows of a crop, we go for the tillage operation. Such is called as row zone tillage. Then flow plant tillage. With the planting of the crop, the row zone is tilled. That becomes the flow plant tillage. And the wheel track tillage, where plowing is done as usual, but tractor is used for sowing, and the wheels of the tractor will pulverize the soil. The wheels of the tractor will pulverize soil. forms the wheel track tillage. The next is another important concept of the modern concepts of tillage, that is the zero tillage. Zero tillage concept was given by G.B. Triplets in the year 1950. Hence, he was considered to be as the father of tillage. Father of zero tillage is G.B. Triplets, and father of tillage is Jetterthal. So, zero tillage is also called as no-till. It is an extreme form of minimum tillage where primary tillage is completely avoided and secondary tillage is restricted to the seed bed preparation in the row zone only. That we call it as zero tillage, where primary tillage is completely avoided, secondary tillage is restricted to the seed bed preparation. 50 to 100% of crop residue are left on the soil surface. But if we see compared to that of conventional conservation agriculture, at least 30% of crop residue is left. But in zero tillage, primary tillage is completely avoided, secondary tillage restricted to seed bed preparation, and at least 50 to 100% of the crop residue are maintained on the soil surface. For weed control, broad spectrum, non-selective, non-residual herbicide are used, such as glyphosate, diquat, and paraquat. The next another method in a till planting in zero tillage is one of the method of practicing in zero tillage. The machinery accomplishes 4 tasks in one operation: that cleans a narrow strip over the crop, open the soil for seed insertion, place the seed and cover the seed properly. A wide sweep and trash bar clear a strip over the previous crop row, and planter sow opens a narrow strip into which seeds are planted and covered. In this way, the till planting is done with respect to the zero tillage. And the herbicides such as non-selective translocated herbicides, paraquat, glyphosate can be used. Then another modern concept of tillage is stubble mulch tillage. It is a year-round system of managing the plant residue with implements that undercut the residue, loosen the soil and kill the weed. In case of stubble mulch, what happens? We have stubble on the soil surface. Here, the managing the crop residue, where implement will cut the residue from the beneath the soil surface and it kills the weed, and that becomes a residue on the soil surface. Stubble mulch tillage or stubble mulch farming is a new approach was developed for keeping the soil protected, and whether by growing a crop or by crop residue left on the soil surface. Sweep or blades are generally used to cut the soil up to 12 to 50 centimeters depth. To sweep tillage, a sweep is used to cut the soil at a depth of 12 to 15 centimeters from the soil. So, unusually large amount of residues are present. A disc type of implement is used to first operation in order to incorporate the crop residue into the soil. This hastens the decomposition. When you go with the stubble mulch tillage, when you cut the soil, stubble below the soil surface, a large number of residue left over the soil. So that can be overcome by the disc harrow. The methods are adopted for sowing crops in stubble mulch farming is that similar to zero tillage, a wide sweep or trash bar is used to clear a strip, and a narrow planter sow opens a narrow furrow in which seeds are planted. In case of stubble mulch tillage, what happens? The residues are there. So a small slit has to be removed over the residues where sowing operation can be done. So a narrow chisel of 5 to 10 centimeter, a narrow chisel of 5 to 10 centimeter, which is worked throughout the soil at a depth of 15 to 12 centimeter, leaving all the plant residue on the surface. The chisel shatters the tiller plants of surface crust. Planting is done through the residue with a special planter such as happy seeder. We generally use happy seeder for sowing under the minimum tillage or conservation tillage. This is the crop. If you see under the residue is there, a huge residue with the crop stand, very advantage under the dry land condition. Yes, we'll end up today's class here. We'll start our next lecture 9 with crop density.